Welcome, everyone, to It's a Virus webinar, Finding Opportunities in Chaos. My name is Natalia, and I will be your host for this webinar. It's a Virus is a tech company that's accelerating the world's transition to a sustainable mobility industry. We develop software and applications that meet the high standards of the mobility industry. First of all, thank you very much for all our speakers who have been joining us today, and for all of our attendees for attending the webinar. We are very proud to have 3 great speakers. Each speaker has a unique and different background, which will be very interesting to see. We have Mr. Ruud Somberg as the board member of Dutch Startup Association. Mr. Ruud Somberg is an experienced advisor and investor with a demonstrated history of working in the investment management industry. He is a strong professional with an entrepreneurial drive, skilled in private equity and corporate finance, but also in business strategy and business development. Next, we have Mark Wessling as the co-founder of Venture Rock. Mr. Mark is a professional advisor and a heavyweight entrepreneur. He was involved as a co-founder of 12 startups and investor in 152 startups. Startups are active in Africa, Asia, and Europe. Already in early 2000, Mark was involved in concepts that we would now describe as a DAO. Mark is the founder of Venture Rock, reinventing venture capital by investing in pre-seed to Series A in an almost automated way. And last, we have Ms. Marieke de Ruiter de Wild as the founder of the New Fork. Ms. Marieke de Ruiter de Wild fascination for agriculture started during her studies in the field of agricultural economics at the Wageningen University. After achieving her Master of Science, Marieke worked in farm data for 15 years in over 40 different countries. Next, if you have any question during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. After the Q&A session, if there are still some questions left, we will discuss it together. Now, without further ado, please welcome Mr. Johan Verhul, the CEO of It's a Virus, as the moderator for today's webinar. Mr. Johan, time is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Thank you everyone for joining this webinar. So we had a lot of subscribers, so it's great to have another successful webinar already. But let's we need to get started. Thank you also again for all the speakers again who are joining us. I'm proud to have you on board because you 3 are all experienced entrepreneurs and have faced good times, but of course as an entrepreneur you also face challenging times, and because there is a lot of debate going on what will happen next, I thought it would be a great subject to touch, like what to do if shit hits the fan. Yeah, so I would like to discuss 3 different subjects. First of all, I would like to begin with what do you think is causing the upcoming economic downturn? Secondly, I would like to discuss tips and tricks and things that have benefited you in a previous economic downturn. And the last question I would like to answer is, like, will there be alternative forms of business financing, and if so, what kind of forms? So let's get started with the first the first question. So there's a lot of debate this time when it comes to the actual cause of this economic downturn, and I thought that's fascinating because, like, the last economic downturn that we witnessed was pretty clear. Like, Lehman Brothers fell, and it's just started, and it made transparent that within this economic system of banking there was something really, really wrong. And from there on, it was just a set of domino keys that were falling. For me, it's less clear. I have my ideas, but there's no Lehman Brothers in this situation. So I would like to get started with Mark. Mark, what do you think is at this moment causing this panic?
It's a combination of a few things, right? The Lehman is now a war that triggered something. And if you see the local economies, the growth of applications and jobs is tremendous in some countries, and they can't fulfill the demand. So there's a lot of pressure, but it's also connected to, for instance, in the Netherlands, we have a lot of trouble flying out from Schiphol, and because Schiphol fired thousands of people during COVID. And they now need to rehire them, but a lot of people, they took some sort of the moment to iterate their career and starting something else. And so it's also a combination, a really weird combination of getting everything up and running again after COVID. Suddenly a war is added into the equation. And don't forget that during COVID, but also now the war added from a global supply chain perspective. If you look at the Chinese coast, how many ships are parked over there trying to embark or load their new stuff? It's huge. And don't forget that a really important channel from Asia to Europe was also blocked for two weeks with a large container ship, which also shocked the entire supply chain. Now, and then you have almost like a perfect storm.
Yeah. Okay. So in your explanation, the war is what Lehman Brothers was in 2008. But it makes sense to me. Ruud, what is your perception on how we get in this situation that we are in now?
Yeah. Thanks, Jochem. Well, I like the way Mark is presenting the situation and what the causes are from a real world perspective, actually. But of course, and the Lehman Brothers or the last crisis was triggered by financial assets that weren't clear or weren't real. So I like the way that Mark is emphasizing it from a real world perspective. But there's one thing that is really important, and that's the rise of the interest rates, because we had almost for 10 years free money, even paying for keeping money at the bank, keeping your money at the bank, and that is over. And of course, when a lot of people thought it can be true that interest rates are negative, but we have experienced that it is possible. And of course, from that point on, the only way is up. And now it got up very quickly, because we talked about 2-3% which the interest rates have grown, at least in Europe. And that's such a shock to all the financing parties in the world that has to have a real impact on the real world, of course. So I think that interest rates is the the biggest influence from the financial markets to the real world.
Yeah, and basically that's a situation where we are returning to normal because
Exactly.
free money is weird, right? That
Yeah.
we get money to use money from central banks, which is insane in perception.
And
All right.
especially if you also compare it to Asia interests,
Yeah.
we're still in very low interest, and if you go from 0.5% to 1%, is doubling of interest, but 1% interest is still ridiculously low.
Yeah. Historically, that's still extremely low, of course. Ruud, another question to you is: look, what do you think? And when do you think this crisis will hit like the real economy? Because now still jobs are booming and consumer behavior is still we're still pretty active in buying stuff. So when do you expect this to influence people in their daily life? Yeah.
I'm not sure, because indeed the discussion or the effects of this crisis are in the financial world very clear, but in the real world it's not visible yet. What is visible that you have to pay more for your energy in much countries. If you want to attract financing for all kind of stuff, it's not that cheap anymore. But generally, if you look at crisis like this, it takes years from this point on to recover, and well, hitting the real economy. I think it depends on the countries and which region in the world you're talking about, actually, because of course I have a Dutch and European perspective, but just what Mark said, that interest rates in Asia are a different cook than in Europe or America. So it will. I'm very curious about how that will work out in the different regions.
Yeah, there is a huge difference, of course, in terms of interest rates, because as most of you know, I'm situated in Asia, and there, just on your personal bank account, you'll actually get an interest rate every month paid out because of the money that you've put on the bank account. It's and from your
normal, actually.
perspective, that's like, it's weird. Do I get interest?
But of course Asia has a different supply chain for energy, for example, than Europe, and America has a different supply chain also. But energy prices worldwide are inflated the most of everything you can buy, and well, that's something that's hitting.
Yeah. Marike, when we're talking about supply chains, we're of course talking about you. So do you have any insights for us when it comes to what do you think is the cause of this economic downturn or this upcoming economic downturn?
Yeah, well, I think there are a lot of similarities actually with when Lehman kicked in. One thing is that, I mean, we still have a broken financial system. I think a lot of the issues that were broken are even more broken today. I think there's still this effect that, this domino effect. So when something happens, like a triggering event, like the Ukraine, then a lot of the other things become much more apparent, but they were there already, right? I mean, in agriculture and in supply chains, the whole thing that the cost of supply chains and transport had been rising and rising and rising. I mean, it was looming. So I actually expected the crisis much earlier on, and I think we kept it under under the table for quite a while. And I think the big difference with then and now is the connectivity. I think we're much more connected, not only on digital level, but markets are also much more connected. And I think that gives a very interesting new challenge, because the solution therefore also has to be more connected. So in terms of, Churchill's never waste a good crisis, I think it's a great opportunity to redesign things and really, get things better than we did after the financial crisis that we had previously. So I think there's work to be done.
Yeah, that's a good point that you raised, because if you look at the number, or the staggering amount of loans that people and governments have, I think it's much higher compared to 2008. So indeed, we've never fixed the system that caused the collapse 14 years ago.
We didn't even get them into jail, right? We didn't even punish them.
No. We gave them a few million and let them continue, basically. So that's
the problem, and that problem is still here, right? So we didn't fix it. So I think it's about time we start fixing that more systemically.
And do you think that these messages of doom that we see that are being spread by venture capitalists and tech fora, do you think they are exaggerated, or do you think these messages are on the spot?
No, I mean, the thing is that, economy is nothing more than perception, right? It all thrives on perception. And what really annoys me is that in very serious media channels, there is a very, everybody makes each other crazy and has a lot of, I think, wrong informed and a lot of emotional reporting comes out. I mean, see, look at the crypto market, right? It's an interesting case.
Yeah, that's an interesting case.
It's a lot about perception, and it's
that's these cycles are extremely interesting. But, Ruud and I were discussing the day before yesterday, and which firm did we discuss that also just collapsed 90% in value within 8 months?
Klarna.
Yeah,
Klarna, the Danish consumer credits company.
Yeah. Yeah, so they did they were valued at how much before?
46 billion.
And now exactly.
They raised I believe they raised 600 million euros against a valuation of 4 or 5 billion.
Yeah.
So it's a tenth of the earlier valuation, or at least the valuation people gave it. It was it's a paper. Of course, it's a paper trail, or the paper way of looking at it. It's not real, but it was valued at 46 billion before.
Yeah, but if it were traded on an exchange, then we would see a 90% decrease in value. So these perceptions, I think, are good. It's good that we mentioned that indeed, Marieke, because it's these perceptions that create these fears, and can create a 90% collapse in value overnight.
Exactly. And I have a statement here, or a challenging. I think there's no crisis. I think we have an opportunity to really bring in some good corrections.
Yeah.
But I don't think we are in crisis. I don't think so.
Yeah, 100% agree, Marieke. Because if you look at the big numbers, the trade volumes, etc., it's not a crisis. And there's still super demand on skilled people. So it's a very funny crisis that might add. And concerning the Klarna story, Klarna, the business model is pay later, get it now and pay later, and that's not a healthy business model, to be honest. But if you look at all the developments in the venture capital, especially from the US, if you look at Uber, they raised a shitload of money, went to the stock exchange, and then they also collapsed. There are many examples, but it's all connected by private equity companies that said they became VCs and poured a shitload of money into all those companies, billions of euros, in the hope to pump up inflation and then an IPO. If you look at 20 years ago, when Microsoft, Google, and Facebook went to the stock exchange, they were valued like below 1 billion at the stock exchange. And Apple went on the stock exchange below 1 billion, and now it's worth 2.2 trillion, and all the value was created on the stock exchange. Fast forward now, in the past few years, they pumped up Uber, they pumped up Airbnb to tens of billions of euros of valuation, and then they went IPO. Yeah, and then the shit show started. And then you get like these type of deflated valuations.
Yeah, that's a good moment for a lot of people to cash out, of course. And
why? Because the supply of money was abundant. Yeah, if you look at how many Andreessen raised, Tiger Global raised, Axel raised, KKR, all those big guys. It's ridiculous amount of money. And they need to spread it and put it into work within 5 years.
Yeah, and I also think, greed has no limits, and greed has no rules or governance, right? I think that's an issue too. I think we need to, and there's some economies that are a bit different than others, but I think the whole sort of free highway of greed is an important factor as well, right? People just want to get more and more and more until it collapses.
Yeah, so
that's how we work as humans.
Oh, sorry. Because the valuation of Klarna was talking about, referring to, was based on an investment from a US-based VC.
Yeah. And they were on the route of just pumping the business model, you mean?
We had also a few alumni of Startup Bootcamp. They received a shitload of money. They were asking for 1/10, and they were offered 10 times.
Yeah, so, there you go. But that becomes really problematic later on in your when you want to raise, of course, additional money, because if the valuation is set, you don't want to raise below that valuation, right? It's a sign that it's not really going well. So these valuations, you need to work through these steps in a very, very strategic way, because if you do your Series A and your Series B, you need to, at some moment, do another round. And raising times 10 is absolutely great at that moment. But what happens in a year and a half or 2 years when you're done, then it becomes a huge challenge, especially in the situation that we're now in.
Yeah, or you use the money to get to enough profitable that you can create a sustainable company, and that's where the old economy is back again, because that's how you build a business.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's also a good like a bridge to the second subject. So I would like to go to like tips and pragmatical tricks that have benefited you as an entrepreneur during previous tough times. And I remember starting this company in 2008, and for me, I just graduated. So, and I never really doubted that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I felt like, if this is the situation, then I'll just get started. I need to deal with tough economic situations anyway, and I wasn't really keen on finding a job. So I'm just, let's go. But I remember then there were three things. So first of all, the clients that we worked with, they were really eager to innovate, because the bigger companies, they still have money, and what they saw was a need to fix things that they always, or they had neglected for the past 10 years. And they were, of course, connected to these mega trends that are still going on, digitization. So that is the need for innovation will be more, I think, will pop up in the next 2 years. And of course, if you're profitable and you are in this innovative space that is connected to a mega trend, like the world probably is your oyster, and you will there will be a lot of opportunities again, I think. And what I also saw was that what was really funny back then, I didn't have any challenge finding an office. I could rent like a huge old ABN AMRO, like a bank office for really, it was really, really cheap because nobody was looking for office spaces, and ABN AMRO just didn't went bankrupt, but that's it. It was super easy to find talented people, because a lot of people were out of work. And what I now realize is that it really my skill to sell, I have that from that era, because even though there was still a demand going on for the services, that building cool digital stuff, that was still there, but I really needed to convince people of that necessity. So my skill to sell was the groundwork of that was being laid in that era. So I would like to start with Mark. Like, Mark, obviously you went through a number of economic downturns with your companies. Like, what did you see happening with these companies, and which companies did you think like they did something, especially during that moment, that we all think of like now, that that was super smart?
That's sort of my first turmoil was end of 90s and starting 2000, where the internet boom hit, and I was in the midst of creating a company that was aggregating all kinds of restaurants, and you could sort of find, look, and book a table online. And back then it was like a fantastic idea, and we built the technology, and etc. And during at the midst of the internet boom, we were start selling it to the restaurant owners, and the restaurant owners were looking at us like, I don't believe in internet, because everything crashed. So everybody was looking at, nobody will ever order a table or book a table online, so we don't do this. And then, you sort of out of a plan. But luckily, we sort of iterated it a bit, and we're looking really towards a different type of customer. And the type of customer was not a restaurant, but a delivery restaurant. So we pivoted into ordering a pizza online, because the problem of a restaurant that does deliveries, they get phones on every 1 minute and need to place an order by the phone. And we saw that they have a fax, no mail. So we sent an order through the fax, so they would not have to pick up the phone. And were able to work during their turmoil. There was no need to pick up the phone, and that later turned out in Just Eat. So pivot until you find a problem that's that's really important. And the reason why we pivoted was also by broadening our scope, and not like digging yourself into a hole that only delivers a smaller insight. So what we did was pause, don't do anything, and then look what the market is doing, and based on that, you try to find a problem that is not a problem tomorrow, but a problem yesterday.
Yeah, yeah, and did the urge of the dot-com crash, did that make you guys more creative?
Of course, because everybody was in disbelief that internet, nobody will order on internet. But in our case, we sort of we routed internet orders, and we had a huge problem or getting the bill paid because we didn't routed payments yet, because there were no online payments yet, credit cards. But in Europe, credit card is less accepted than in the US. But we were able to route orders through an online portal and turn it into fax, which was then sort of used in a delivery restaurant as an order. But once the online payments picked up, but also the always on internet, so because before that you were logging into with a modem and nobody was sitting behind the internet, but then suddenly the growth increased, but also the revenue for us, because in the first 3 years we were not able we sent a lot of invoices, but they were not paid.
Yeah, that's another thing, of course, with restaurants. I see that with other companies that
very likely they don't have a payment culture.
They don't have, yeah, and with margins are low, and it's a tough business to run usually. So that all right, thanks. Then I would like to go to Ruud, because Ruud, I know you also have experienced the dot-com crisis. You had your own incubator. Can you share some insights on that, and can you share us how you adjusted and how the companies that you worked with adjusted in terms of like which ones did survive and how did they do that?
I have one example, and indeed it is the same time as Mark is talking about the 2000 crisis, where everybody who was not that young or is not that young still can remember that World Online went to the stock exchange in Amsterdam, and after 2 months everybody who had invested was fucked, I think, because the value was at least 50% lower, and I believe that it went to 20-25% or something like that from the introduction price. But there we worked with a company that in principle had everything in place, or also as a concept on traveling or travel information and connecting travel destinations with your personal profile. And of course, everybody now has a smartphone, but at that time, the Palm, it wasn't a phone, it was a device. You should use the Palm to connect to the internet somewhere, which was not that easy yet. But in principle, the whole information of know a lot about destinations in the world and traveling, and go there and get a personal advice on what you're going to do on a certain place. It was all as a concept was there, but we had to pivot that also with to work together with all kinds of companies that had interest in travelers, and let them pay for advertisements or content or anything. So that wasn't the original plan, and I think that the trouble then is, just like Mark said, you have to work towards a new business model, and that didn't work out that well with that company. And actually, if you look at this space now, there are a lot of different travel applications available, which has just parts of the original thought that we had. But of course, it was difficult to keep this company running because we didn't have found the right way to earn money, and we even couldn't send invoices, just like Mark told us just now. He could send invoices, but they weren't paid. That's even worse, I think. But
Yeah.
but of course, if you can survive that.
Of course, that's really really annoying. That if you somehow find a great product market fit, and then if that becomes your issue, that is extra challenging. So I think that the takeaway from what you guys are mentioning is that keep your eyes open for new opportunities, because they will also arise, and then be very quick in adjusting yourself and your company in testing and finding if that opportunity that you see is really valid and has a business case.
I think that Mark will tell you, if you want to, that he invests in people and not in an idea principally. And you have the flexibility, need the flexibility in your team to change the plan.
Yeah, that's especially
in love of the problem that you want to solve, and not in love of the solution that you've built.
Yeah, the solution is just is part of the strategy, and the strategy usually you have to fine-tune that once or twice, which is just because we're all doing and learning at the same time.
Back in the days, we wanted to empower the SMEs to have an online presence, because we believe that online will bring them a new category of customers, and they did not had the power or the ability to build their own website or do online marketing. So that's what's the problem that we want to solve with getting the restaurants online and building a presence. And then we pivoted into the delivery restaurants, and then from a not only presence, but also not booking a table, but ordering food.
Yeah. Marieke, so if you have to give any tips and tricks in terms of what you can do as a business owner to the audience, what do you think is what is popping up in your mind?
Yeah, a few things, of course, but one of the very important one is throw away your ego and pride, and I don't know, be ready to bite the dust. I think that's very much an attitude that you need to acquire if you don't have it. And don't get nervous. Deal with things how they come, and there will always be a solution. I think sort of having a strong attitude is 80% of the solution. That's one thing. And the second would be really to dig into your network and ask them for help. I think that's often overlooked, where you look for you want to look good for your network, your clients, but also your staff, for example. And I think the more you take them in and you make them part of the reality, that really helps to come to solutions. So I think really use the power that is in your team and in your network, including your own clients. I think that's something you learn along the way.
Yeah, I think I think both of the issues that you shared are connected, right? Because in order to honestly reach out to your network and say, hey, I've built this, but now we've ended up in this situation. Can you help? You need to be humble, and being humble is it can be challenging as a founder, because you're speaking at these events and everyone is interested and everyone is giving this hopium to you, like this is a great idea, it's going to be big, but then if it's not going in that direction financially, it becomes stressful. So that the space that you are in is pulling you towards a different attitude that you just mentioned. So just stay calm, humble, relax, and take care of your money is
show leadership.
Yeah, it's also something. it's something I also had to learn the hard way. But we live and learn. So
Yeah.
one thing that I've learned in the like when we started was a trick from actually from my brother, because well, my brother and I we started at the same time at the same attic in Amsterdam. And what he did really well was putting in his agenda, like once a year, I'm going to take one day, then I'm going to take a look at all the expenses that I have, and I try to lower them, like everything. I don't care what it is, I try to lower them. So office rent, the energy bill, the telephone bill, internet. So he's calling all these companies, and he's telling, yeah, I want to pay less rent, otherwise I'm going to move. I want to pay a lower bill for my internet, otherwise I'm going to see if there's a different provider. And that I just copied the trick because I saw like that worked brilliantly. And even from a landlord, you would say, like, and especially of course back then the economic situation was differently than it at this moment is when it comes to office rent. So we just get better deals, and sometimes the bill was just lowered by 50 euros or 100 euros per month, but it all adds up. So it's just by one day of galling, you just save like 30,000 euros on a yearly basis. I thought that's a really nice trick to do every year. Just call everyone,
Yeah.
even the tax authorities.
And it makes sense, right? I mean, as if you're a supplier, you'd rather have a bit less of an invoice, but at least a continuing invoice than no invoice at all. So that's, I think that bottom line is super applicable to different areas.
Yeah. We also found out that especially these internet companies, the internet service providers, they have they just have an offer ready for people who are calling like that. So you know that you always get some kind of deal of the month, which is great. It's
and I also think an important maybe third issue or topic is keep up the energy. So focus also, and including in your own team and with your clients, keep the fun alive, or do stuff that really invigorates and gets the energy up, because if you're all in stress modus all the time, that wears out.
Yeah, and how would you combine that with keeping a sense of reality?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, if you would assess your whole week, there's something that really gives you rather than takes energy. So be aware of what that is, and amplify that.
Okay. Hey, there's a question from the audience that you wanted to answer. It's like, what is the best thing to do for a startup to survive in these challenging situations?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of this applies to that question, right? And I think it's startups and challenges. If you are a scale up, if you are, there always are challenges. So I think this whole notion that you only have challenges when you are in the startup phase, forget it. That's in maybe in fairyland, but challenges will be there for the rest of your life. If you start to be your own boss, then challenges are here to stay. So I think that's one
same day.
Yeah, it never gets quiet.
Yeah, the best advice that I always give is take care of yourself first, because you need to be really living not on the max, but also keep caring of yourself, your health, your well-being, not working 24 hours, seven days a week. During my years at Startup Bootcamp, we had a big saying on the wall: a running horse cannot drink water. So you need to make sure that now and then you need to stop running and drink water again, not too much alcohol, by the way, and then really sort of wind down so you can sprint again. And a lot of people, they think they need to run for 7 days a week, 24 hours a week, 24 hours a day, but I've seen even founders being burnt out by it, and in one case even died.
Yeah.
Of not taking care of him, and he got a brain hemorrhage way too early at his 47th birthday.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah, that's indeed. Like if I have to take that into like the first years that I started, we were also just working 7 days a week all the time. But surely you also eventually you notice that like the amount of time that you spend, it's just not working. It's not effective anymore. So just working a bit less. It has a more positive outcome even because you also think when you're not working, you actually come up with nice solutions when you're just
exactly. There's a fantastic interview of John Cleese, Sir John Cleese, one of the biggest comedians from the UK, and he was interviewed like, how did you came up with Monty Python? And if you don't know Monty Python, look it up. They create brilliant movies. And he said, by doing 3 months, nothing.
Probably something
creative, and we became creative, and then we suddenly came up with something.
That's a good example, I think. I would like to go to the next subject, if that's okay with you guys, unless you have something you can share. Like
there was one question also on how do you capture benefits from a crisis like this? This is the a wise man said recession, that one. I think it's an important topic, and to some extent, I think we covered that. But I also think I think this really goes back to Mark's remark, where he said, well, stay focused on the love for the problem rather than the love for your solution. So I think if you you shouldn't get too blown out of your direction by all the noise that's happening around you, and keep focusing on the things that are relevant to you. So make a distinction on, what is really interrupting with your business strategy, and what might affect it but is not affecting it yet. So I think you should really sort of clean out what is really important to you, and in there, I think you will always find a lot of opportunities. That because everybody is in chaos, and I think a lot of parroting happens, right, where people just repeat the narrative of the other. I think if you focus on what you do and be clear on what you do, I think that generates a lot of attention and opportunity.
If you're one of the few,
what you guys are thinking.
I think that if you're one of the few who keeps a clear mind, definitely increases your chances by default, no matter what you're doing. Ruud, do you have any remarks on this subject? Tips and tricks.
Creativity, of course, is very important as an entrepreneur. Keeping the entrepreneurial spirit is also about keeping your team creative, I think. But times like this, and assuming that we get into the crisis, because we're not there yet. The only real crisis thinking now is that we expect a crisis, and we see that valuation have been dropping. And the example of Klarna is clear that if you want to raise money now, you have to take a cut as an investor, the American investor of Mark, that the valuation is lowered in the next round. But what you see is that of course that raising money now is more difficult. And if you are in a position that you don't have a long runway, then it's going to be tricky, and then of course maybe it's not the time to focus on raising money, but really on your business, and focusing on what helps you on this very moment. Is that cutting costs? Is that trying to get paid for services or products that are maybe not your ideal where you're working on day or night, but it pays the bills also. So that asks for a real other creativity than the, let's say, for the real thing for the long term. When COVID hit it, well, at least Europe, what I saw is that everybody was in panic, and after 3 months, everybody was selling more than ever and was more successful than ever, and everybody. We had also government grants for or loans, but they weren't relevant actually. But the panic hits and everybody's doing what you would expect when you're in panic, but take a step back and make life simple for at least a few months. And for currently, I think that it always works that it takes a few months, maybe half a year, that investors and companies have to adjust to the new real, and the new real is lower valuations, smaller investment rounds, and doing smarter things with money on a short term.
Yeah, it's like you shared with me 2 days ago. Like it's a recalibration of the market, basically.
Yeah, and
All
it
right.
doesn't happen in one day, but especially investors have the time to think about what they want to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And as a company, you have to rethink your strategy, short term and long term.
All right. Thanks for that. I would like to go to the next topic. But before that, I want to share with you like one simple thing that helped us, like me and my brother again, a lot in the past almost 2 decades of being an entrepreneur. Is like we printed out the handbook of the tax authorities, which is absolutely super boring to read. It's like this thick pack of paper, and then it was just laying around at the office, and we dedicated ourselves to reading every page, because with your tax expenses, it's a big part of the expenses that you have in especially in the Netherlands. So if you just learn all about the tips and tricks that they give to you on how to do that in a way that you're not paying too much, just by using the information that they provide to you, that helped us also a lot of times, just by making small but smart decisions a lot of times. So that especially if you're from the Netherlands, just print out the book and read it. It's super boring, but for the rest of your life, it will help you. So let's go to the next section, the third one. So will there be any alternative forms of business financing? And if so, like what kind of shapes do you think that we will see? I would like to get started with Mark. Mark, there's also straight away a nice question from you that fits this, that I think is a nice question for you that I think fits this topic. It's from Stefano. Good to see you again, Stefano, by the way. So what is your take on lowering valuations and go for further funding now, as opposed to postpone funding when valuations pick up again?
Any valuation is always based on supply and demand, right? And but what I always advise entrepreneurs is to manage the cap table, and too high a valuation can also bring you in a downfall. So manage the cap table. How much shares do you need to become attractive in later stage VCs, right? And also that you still have a saying in your company. My personal favorite is creating an entity that is able to get a lot of smaller ticket investors into your company that even are your customers. So one of the examples I've also helped in the Netherlands is a company called Neleman Vineyards. He makes biological wines, and he added 3,000 smaller investors to his cap table, and they're all our customers of his product. Guess what happened? Those 3,000 smaller investors, they became its ambassador, and all of them, they get like 10 or 15 new customers in. So based on his new investor base, he suddenly saw a huge increase in his revenue. That's the model for the future. And to me, I don't believe in venture capital. I don't consider myself a VC. I consider myself an entrepreneur who creates an ecosystem around entrepreneurs that support them from pre-seed to Series A. And I don't believe that the future of VC in the next 10 years or after the next 10 years are there. I think you get more community driven funding mechanisms than venture capital driven funding systems.
Yeah, I think this take is super interesting because yesterday I was talking to another founder who is in the process of raising money, and lucky for him, it's going well. And we discussed like what happened with so what happens when I was also in a situation when I was raising money is that's the most effective when the people that you raise with are incentivized indeed to make your company a success, whether they are and if they're a customer, then obviously that's the most perfect example to work with, so that they will sell your wine over your competitors. That's
of course from a consumer point of view, but one of our companies, they also have two investors on their cap table that have access to their customers. So from a distribution point of view, so then you also have alignment of all the parties to create a success.
All right. Thanks.
But we got or a good advice is also that revenue is the best equity.
Yeah,
and I think that's
always
a good one always. Yes.
Yeah, or the other way around, Ruud. Fundraising is not a business model.
Yeah. It has been for a few years now. So let's see what. Let's see what happens. So Ruud, what do you think in terms of employee participation? So there is, let's say, this economic downturn will continue, and there will be it will hit the real economy, and you will have to lower salaries or fire people. But compensation, you can work on that via another way. And employee participation is, I think, maybe also in the direction of a more community-driven concept. What do you think, Ruud?
Well, there's a lot to say about that, but from my role as a board member at the Dutch Startup Association, I can confirm that there is a problem in the Netherlands, at least, that it has to be more attractive to give people the opportunity to get options or shares in the company they work for, because young companies don't have that much money to pay talented or real talented people. But there has been some change from next year on. We will do that in a better way in the Netherlands compared to other countries. So I'm happy about that. But getting back to your question, of course, if you get paid or get involved in the company, like having options or shares, is a way of taking a risk that expected outcomes will not come through, or dreamed outcomes will not come true. But it can also be a motor for more adjustment or alignment from your people to the company to work towards new solutions and getting through the crisis. And so I don't think that's generally the workforce is talking every day about what the value is of the option or the value of the stock. At least not that's not the issue. The vibe of the company, I think, is helped with participation of employees and getting aligned, but it doesn't mean that it has to work all the time or and in a financial way. So I think that in a crisis, this is a helpful method to keep people motivated and to work towards new solutions.
I'm curious, Ruud, will the taxable moment of your options or shares that you own as an employee, will it be a different moment than it is now? If you because the situation was
in Holland, the taxation from next year on, the taxation will be not on the moment that you transfer the options into shares. It will be your choice to pay then or when the shares are sold.
Okay, so when it becomes liquid for you. Okay, that's
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, but there are also two other options. Like you can also have virtual shares, aka ghost shares. You can also have sales commissions transferred into warrants. There are multiple options. That's not only from stock or stock options. There are multiple options to create incentives, to create a vibe in your company like we're all in this together. If we get it to the end, then everybody wins. And then you create a win-win-win situation, and not like the founder has a shitload of money and everybody can go home and drink and have a beer.
Yeah, yeah. I think in the end that is super important. Just going through a process of a crisis together, to have this team working together and work together, win together. That's great. Marike, what is your take on like alternative forms of financing?
Yeah, well, I think that the big alternative form of financing is in crypto and in programmable money, and that's where we're just starting. So I think there's so much to evolve there. That is my key response. And I do think, in times of
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, go.
No,
in
please continue.
times of crisis, then the existing financial institutions are moving. They need to, and I wouldn't call it to innovate, but they need to change at least a little. And that is what we're seeing that is happening to a very, I think, minimum extent. And I think we need different. And I think the big thing that's happening in financing is again this connectivity. So also financial markets and financial service providers are much more international and global than they have ever been, and it gives a healthy competition as well. Which is if I speak for the Netherlands, for example, it's very much needed. More competition on financial offerings.
Yeah, no, it's clear that there's a difference between how companies raise money in the Netherlands compared to other countries anywhere. It's more challenging if you are in a startup situation.
Yeah, and in the Netherlands overall, I think the investment climate in the Netherlands is very conservative. and very they take lesser risks than in other areas.
I think Mark would disagree, but
No. So I
Yeah.
don't want to. So we are the most insured country in the world. So that also
Yeah.
means that we're very risk averse. So I always say, guys, there are many investors worldwide that really want to invest in a Dutch-based company. So your investors are not in the Netherlands. Go out there. From day one, we always have created all our companies, international companies from day one. Make English-based contracts, English-based shareholder agreement, English-based, everything English-based. And then you sort of, if you want to become an international company, behave like one and act like one.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, so we're going to Dubai and Vietnam tomorrow for that reason.
Yeah,
that's going to be exciting.
Depressed by the Dutch.
So one of the companies that also Jochem knows, UNL, and they tried to get business in Europe or in the Netherlands. They failed, and they now have a fantastic business in the APAC region because the problem there is much bigger. Than here. So go where the problem is, and not go where you want. No, go where the problem is.
Exactly. Yeah, and I also think that in general that you have some countries where the appetite for digital solutions is lesser than in others. So I think, for example, in the UAE region, the whole notion of technology is much more accepted and much more has a warmer bath to step into. Yeah,
100% agree. Yeah.
Right.
Speaking of which, Jochem, the two new investors in us just entered my building, so I also need to leave.
All right, no worries. I was also trying to find a nice way of wrapping it up because we are.
Then I give you a nice way to wrap it up.
But there we go. We close. No, thanks. We were already for an hour and 10 minutes in a really nice, insightful conversation. So I would like to thank everyone for their time. So I would like to wrap it up with one thing is that. The most crucial advice is just stay calm, keep focused, but also, but be smart and be innovative and be pragmatical because in raising money is one thing, but working towards profit is just it's a matter of lowering your cost and or increasing your revenue, and you can do that in many different ways. So thanks again for your time. Thanks for all the great insights. I would like to thank the audience as well for your attention, and looking forward to the next session again. So
welcome.
You're welcome.
Goodbye, everyone.
See you around, everybody.
Yeah,
thank you.
Nice. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Within the next few days, we will share a recording of this event in case you want to send it to your colleagues or friends who have not been able to join. Thank you again for joining us today, and we wish you have a great day ahead. See you next time.